Let me just start off by asking, why is it that every time that I'm using a public restroom, the floor is really sticky or there's a tiny little puddle of pee right next to the urinal? Like, it's right in front of you. The aiming shouldn't even be that complicated. I know that you have a tiny little penis, but still you should somehow be able to aim it into the urinal. It's huge. It's right in front of you. There's like no math, no science to it. And yet for some unknown reason, it still continues to happen out in public. I'm honestly starting to lose faith in all of humanity. But all jokes aside, in today's video, we're going to get pretty hot and heavy, and I have to clarify before we get straight into today's video. First of all, this is just my personal opinion, my personal take. Everybody has different mindsets, different objectives, different expectations, and most importantly, we value different things. You know, some people might want sculpt over articulation, some people might want extra accessories or a better head sculpt over anything. So like I said, people look at things in a completely different manner. And secondly, and most importantly, this is only for the Marvel Select line. This has nothing to do with the Diamond Select line in general. I do believe that they have some phenomenal reveals or some phenomenal releases recently. For example, they did pick up The Walking Dead, and those particular figures have phenomenal sculpt work. They look very accurate to their source material. Same thing with the Invincible comic book line, which they now have portrayed into action figure form, and the list goes on. We have the Lord of the Rings action figures. They have also been working on some of my favorite franchises. For example, The Nightmare Before Christmas is another great little wave that they released, and even though they're not really my cup of tea, I absolutely love the franchise and I love the source material, and to see them in action figure form is just a breath of fresh air, especially from Diamond Select. They also had a little wave of Avatar action figures, which I've heard some pretty decent things about. So overall, Diamond Select is very strong right now. There are a plethora of different collectors out there that only collect Diamond Select. They're absolute diehards, and there are other people that don't really collect Diamond Select, but they value the line. They find figures now and then that are or that fit perfectly into their display. But as you guys can tell, this has everything to do with the Marvel Select line, and I kind of touched on this in one of my previous videos where I essentially bashed Marvel Select or Diamond Select for not really releasing that many figures based in the Marvel universe, and then secondly, not really releasing quality stuff. From time to time, they'll release stuff with great sculpt, great head sculpts, great, accessories and things of that nature. But overall, they were very lackluster reveals, and a lot of people criticize them, especially people that collect other action figure lines with better articulation and better technology and better engineer work. And I will say, back in the day, I did fall into the rabbit hole of collecting Marvel Select action figures. I did, for example, have the comic book based Planet Hulk. I also had the Mighty Thor. I had a few others, like I believe the Red Hulk, the original Red Hulk, and then I did most recently pick up the Immortal Hulk. So I have dabbled with Marvel Select. Back in the day, I even had I think Superior Spider-Man and a couple of other versions of Spider-Man, but my experiences were usually very dull with this action figure line. The ab crunch was almost non-existent, no butterfly joints. Sometimes they had single jointed elbows and knees that just did absolutely nothing. If you were into action figures that were just meant to be posed in an upright position, then Diamond Select was just tailor-made for you. And I will say there are some characters and some action figures that actually cross over to the Marvel Legends line pretty well, or to just other lines that are related to Marvel. For the longest period of time, for example, you could pick up the Marvel Select Rhino, which was actually a more affordable option than the Marvel Legends Build-A-Figure Rhino, because we still hadn't received the Marvel Legends Retro Rhino. We've seen a lot of people throw in the Marvel Select Hulks into their Marvel Legends display, or even, for example, the Marvel Select Thanos, and there have been at least a couple of those released in the last 5 to 6 years. We got the comic book accurate one, and then we got the MCU version as well. And then let's not forget the Marvel Select Apocalypse action figure, which is honestly one of the more coveted Marvel Select action figures out there, and it was an absolute bargain when it came out at retail. And it was one of those few figures that not only was comic book accurate to an extent, but also you didn't really need it to have great articulation. You didn't need butterfly joints and crazy ab articulation or anything anything like that, because in most cases the figures around him were going to be in great poses. He kind of just had to, stand there and be menacing. So as I said, a lot of great Marvel Select figures have been released in the past, but those are very few and far apart. Sometimes to get a decent release from Marvel Select, you have to wait quite some time. And I'm just going off of the top of my memory here, but I would say we probably received less than 20 Marvel Select action figures last year. And again, that's just an estimate off the top of my head. There are a few, for example, right now that are up for pre-order. You can pick up I think like the War Machine, and there's supposed to be a new Captain America and a few other figures. But for the most part, there aren't that many big releases that are coming out. I said this in a previous video, I would much rather have McFarlane pick up this line, because at least we're going to get some consistency out of him rather than getting one figure like every month or so. And even when we do get the release, it's just this big giant hunk of plastic. In most cases, there's almost little to no articulation. Great sculpt, extra accessories, like there are some features that Marvel or Diamond Select in general does a very good job or excels in, but for the most part, they're very subpar. At least in my personal opinion, I would just much rather have somebody that manufactures action figures that can actually pose, that can actually articulate and get into some of those dynamic poses. And Diamond Select to me just isn't that OM. And just to reiterate, I'm not sitting here telling you guys to never buy any Diamond Select action figures ever, or that they shouldn't be manufacturing action figures in general. I just personally have never felt like they earned the license at that scale, and I don't feel like they've necessarily kept up to date with the Marvel universe. And I feel like it's a little bit disrespectful to the Marvel fans to continue giving us action figures through Diamond Select. They do great stuff outside of the Marvel universe. I already touched on like the Invincible comic book series. I know they're starting to do the Walking Dead action figures, Lord of the Ring, you name it. They have done some absolutely phenomenal franchises. I know back in the day they even had like Pulp Fiction action figures, and some of my all-time favorite Marvel action figures have come from Diamond Select, but I just don't see them improving. With time, I expected their ankle rockers to get better. I expected, butterfly joints, double jointed elbows and knees. I just expected the technology to start updating and keeping up with the times of, collecting in general, but that hasn't been the case. We're still getting some really outdated technology, some really outdated body molds, and I feel like it's time that Diamond Select loses the license to somebody else. I don't know who that is. I mean, if you're really not a McFarlane guy, I guess, you don't have to really support that idea, but at least somebody that can consistently give us Marvel action figures at that 1/10 scale, continuing to improve on the articulation, on some of the newer like pinless technology and things of that nature. And I know I touched on this in the previous video, but it's important to really kind of drive home the point. If you want to look at it from both perspectives, as a fan, I definitely want to see somebody else take over the line, but also on a business standpoint, Disney or Marvel, why wouldn't they want to like really capitalize on the Marvel universe? Marvel Select or Diamond Select clearly doesn't really value the line, or they just don't have the resources to be able to continuously give us Marvel action figures at that scale. Why wouldn't they just go to a different avenue? And I'm not saying that they should go with McFarlane, but I'll use McFarlane as an example. Like his reach and just his resources, I feel like are more suited to the Marvel universe. I don't think that any Marvel action figure line should be like a tiny little obscure collection that very few people keep track of. I feel like it should be pushed to the forefront. It should have multiple releases on a monthly basis, and maybe even like a couple hundred by the end of the year. I feel like there should be a volume out there, and I just don't feel like Diamond Select really is capable of doing that at the moment. And as I already mentioned, I'm just using McFarlane as an example. There are a plethora of other OMs that could take on this line and just give the Marvel universe the proper respect and the attention that it truly deserves. But as always, this is just my personal opinion. This is my personal take. I'm very curious to see what the community has to say. Do you guys genuinely enjoy the Marvel Select line, or just the Diamond Select line in general? Do you guys collect collect a lot of them? Do you dabble? What action figures have you picked up from them? Have you enjoyed them or have you not? I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say, because ultimately the community is the one that decides whether they keep it or not. If they're being profitable, if they're making a decent amount of action figures and Disney is happy with that, then that's where it's going to stay. But ultimately, I feel like there could be a change of scenery in the foreseeable future, just because I don't feel like there's enough coming from Diamond Select. But as always, let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to stay tuned. We do upload pretty consistently. We're starting to wrap it up to like 3 to 4 times on a weekly basis, and we continue to try to push forward in terms of our weekly uploads, but only time will tell if we're able to do that. So thank you guys for tuning in. Stay safe out there, and as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. Pose your action figures, take pictures with them, just have fun with them, even if that means like you're in bed posing action figures, or if you're dropping a deuce posing. I mean, that's completely fine. A little bit weird, but still fine. Anyways, stay safe out there. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.